Meet Steven. It's Thursday afternoon. He spins his chair away from his computer, rubbing his eyes as if the pressure in his head will ease if he just pushes hard enough. 1,000 thoughts are racing. 3 months ago, he was named CEO of a healthcare organization in North Carolina after 20 years of grinding and climbing and proving himself. He has big ideas, a vision of where to take the company, but there's one thing in his way. Everything. He spent the last few weeks meeting with senior leaders, gathering feedback, listening to their concerns, and now he's stuck. How does he communicate his vision without meeting walls of resistance? These leaders have been doing things the same way for years. They're comfortable, and while they won't say it outright, he knows that they're threatened by change. So the question that he's really asking himself over and over again is, will they believe in me? Steven's been grinding even harder since stepping into this role. First in the office, last to leave, every single day. But before he closes the door at night, he's always thinking, I'm so far behind. It feels as though no matter how hard he pushes, he'll never catch up. Meetings leave him drained, with leaders focusing on day-to-day firefighting instead of the future. During a brainstorming session this afternoon, he watched a senior director walk through a PowerPoint, and every slide felt like a relic of the past. He nearly exploded in frustration at how outdated their thinking was. After that meeting, Steven retreated to his office, slumping in his chair, and the weights of his thoughts crashed down. He's disconnected from his team, drowning in self-doubt and wondering if his vision will ever become more than just ideas trapped in his head. Today, I'll be sitting down with Eva Minkoff, founder of Being, TEDx speaker, and executive coach whose mission is to help leaders cultivate empowering relationships with themselves and others. Eva's passion is in unlocking bold leadership potential, and I'm eager to hear how she would guide Steven to bring his vision to life, reconnect with his team, while making sure he prioritizes his own well-being in the process. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. So Eva, we'll get into Steve's story here in a bit, but I really want to learn more about your story. And in learning more about you from what you've shared, from your TEDx talk, content online, you had chronic symptoms when you were younger. It was at the age of 12, but you weren't properly diagnosed until much later in life. And you talk about how that was the source of inspiration for you to do some of the work that you do now. So I'd love for you to share some of that story and how it inspired you to do the work you do.
Thank you for, first of all, acknowledging that. It was indeed a long journey, and not just in years. I mean, I started seeing the top specialists in New York City to try and get me diagnosed at 12. Wasn't diagnosed, as you said, until I was 30. But within those years, there was, time is relative. And some years felt much longer because of how acutely I was trying to navigate my physical and mental journey, as well as the healthcare system. So, I mean, quite frankly, I'm not alone here, can say that I've been traumatized by that process. Not being believed in my symptoms because I have an invisible chronic illness. By the way, while we are taping this, that's such an old term, it is Invisible Disabilities Awareness Week. Woohoo. And just everything that comes along with that, it's similar to any other internal struggles we have as humans. When people can't see what we're going through, we feel very alone in our pain. And that could be physical, but also emotional and mental pain. And because of that, it led me to feeling very disconnected from myself. One, I didn't know what was going on with me. So there's that, because no one could actually confirm that. I just was aware that I was feeling this pain. And then there was also the disbelief from professionals around me and even my loved ones. Especially back then, I feel like we still had this idea that the doctor knows all. And by the way, I'm married to a physician. I love doctors. um, but the truth is, they are not necessarily trained to always dig deeper. There's a lot of stressors. Won't go into that. I could speak extensively on the reasons our healthcare system is a big mess. But the impact was profound. And over the years, I realized there was a tremendous amount of self doubt and not really understanding even who I was, despite me on the surface feeling very in touch. I wrote a diary entry like every night for 20 years. And at some point, I recognized that despite me surface level knowing myself, I actually had no real idea of what was driving my behaviors, driving my thoughts. And if I said I liked myself, what did I really like about myself? So it really was incredible how this physical journey, this journey of chronic illness, led to an introspective journey on connecting with myself and therefore others along the way.
Yeah. There's a post you recently had on LinkedIn that's I think related to what you were just saying. And it was about how people who often say things like, I want to do more. I hear this a lot from people like, I want to do more. I could do more. And you challenge it in your post. And I love what you wrote. You wrote, rather than wanting to do more, why don't you be more?
Hmm.
And I think it's related to what you were just saying there. Tell me a bit about that, what that means to you and that connection or that difference between doing more and being more.
Oh, what a great topic to explore. So, first of all, can't take credit for that. I've studied ontological coaching, which is the study of being, how humans are being. And the difference there is from the standard facilitative coaching, which is all about doing, like getting from step A to B in how we're going to make things happen. And this ontological approach is, sure, we want to get you to be. We can work on what those steps are, but who are you going to be along the way? And in order to figure out who you're going to be along the way, you have to know who you are now, maybe even who you were in your past. In coaching, as many know, we don't do healing per se, but there is a lot of value in looking to the past in what did you do and then, and why was that? What was it that had you maybe make that big mistake that has now shaped your life? Now, why is it? How have you brought that into your current? And I think that's something we'll explore today in the story. It would be a great example. But the being really is how you are showing up. And when I say showing up, it's literally how you're showing up. It could be in your demeanor. It could be in how you dress. It could be in how you stand. And it's also in really the essence that you exude in any given moment. This also doesn't need to be in front of other people. This can just be for yourself. And just to demonstrate a juxtaposition of how one is being and how one is feeling, it's not always the same. I'll use myself. I gave a TED talk, and I will fully disclose that it was the most nervous I've ever been in my entire life. And I like public speaking. I was very, very nervous. And there were many reasons for that I won't go into. But I showed up as confidence, as belief, as care, because that was what was behind my message. I was like, this message needs to get out there. And so that's why I was being. but I was absolutely feeling nervous. I wouldn't say I was feeling confident in that moment.
Hmm.
I know what confident Eva feels like. That was not it.
Well, I watched your TED talk and I thought you presented yourself with a lot of confidence. I felt it, and I felt your energy as you were delivering your message. And I think that the difference between doing and being is really grounded in this one side of this go, 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 achieve, 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 more, more. And this other side of, wait a minute, go within first. Do this introspective work first. Know thyself. And one of the things that you said before, and it's fascinating because as we are building this podcast, and I'm meeting with so many great people like you, the word connection comes up a lot. And
Mm.
and I know that you talk about connection a lot. How do you, I guess maybe I'll phrase it this way. Why do we get disconnected? How do we get disconnected? Because at times we feel so disconnected from ourselves, from our environment. Stephen is going through that. He feels very disconnected from his team, right? What leads us down that path of being disconnected?
Ooh, such a good question. I think there are a lot of things that can lead to it, but perhaps at the core of that is a lack of authenticity. It's like we know deep down, even if we don't know, like maybe we can't put it into words, that something is not aligned. And like, so like literally think about a disconnection. Something is not connected. Something is happening. Maybe it could be behaviors, your environment, literally your thoughts and feelings, but you know that it's really supposed to be this way. Like this would be the authentic, the real, the core of whatever that situation is. I know I'm speaking a little bit esoterically here. But an example, again, don't want to get too into the story, but it's overwhelm. You know, when we're overwhelmed, we are completely disconnected because we're like, oh, I thought things were supposed to go this way. This is what I imagined a situation would be. And yet it is all of these other things. It's just way too much. So I can't even see what the core is anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's you say something in your TED talk that just I wrote down and I said, I have to ask her about this. And it's related to what you just said, which is expectation.
Yeah.
When I have an expectation of how things are going to go and it doesn't go according to my expectation, it could lead to that sense of overwhelm. And
Absolutely.
you also have examples, even experiments you were doing about expectation and happiness. Just one thing I wrote it down, this exact question. I said, um, what or what did you find in your research as well as your experience about the relationship between expectation and happiness?
Well, I mean, I think it's everything and not just happiness. Happiness for sure. And that's what I demonstrated in the study, but I would say more like contentment than it is happiness.
Hmm.
So truly everything is based on expectations because it's all relative to that. One person's expectations and another person's can be completely different, and yet the feeling is the same. I mean, when it comes to privilege, that's a really great example. Like we have, if we're privileged, we have certain expectations, and if you live in possibly a developing country and those aren't even fathomable, your expectations being met are very different. I just want to put this out there to see if it has people thinking a little differently, and it's slightly adjacent, which is that feeling positively or seeing things as expectations being met or being optimistic. I would just say it's like on the positive realm. Like I'm literally thinking of a divide and the negative and the positive. Uh, that I think is the greatest gift and or the greatest skill that any human can have. And I think about this a lot because I will fully admit I have been gifted with natural optimism. And I'm also very privileged in a lot of ways. I think the fact that I'm naturally optimistic is my greatest privilege. I do not take it for granted whatsoever. Doesn't mean I'm always positive, but most of the time I am. I can see possibility, which is why I think I love coaching so much. And I think about people like myself who are in, yeah, in absolute devastating circumstances, or live in poverty, like war, like all sorts of just awful circumstances, like the true extreme opposite to my life. And how, if they are naturally positive, they may be happier, or at very least way more content than a multimillionaire who is naturally negative. Like they're negative Ned or
Mm.
Nancy, as we say, by default. And they just see everything as a lack, or lack of possibility, lack of having. It's very much about the doing, and that's how they receive value, rather than like how they're being in their life and being with others. And so I see it all very connected. And the what I'm trying to share here is that, yes, this is something I naturally feel.
Mm.
And regardless of privilege, other people feel. But it is absolutely something that can be cultivated. It is something that can be, uh, no, I think cultivated is actually really the best word there. I almost
Yeah.
see it like a garden, like
Yeah.
planting a seed and watching it grow. Sometimes it takes a long time, but absolutely worth the care and the
I was
dedication.
I was just out this morning watering some seeds in my front lawn. We just did a whole new we're getting grass, and I'm out there watering those seeds. And I think about that. I'm like, here I am watering, nurturing these seeds, and something wonderful is going to grow. But it's not going to happen unless I'm out here watering these seeds. I have to cultivate it so that the grass will grow. And so you brought something up that I recently learned about in some studies about happiness, which is there is a baseline that we have that all, and it's unique to every person. There's this baseline. And this one study I read, I think, suggested that 50% of our overall happiness is based on this, what we're born with in terms of our level of just genuine optimism and all that. However, there's that whole other section of the way in which or how we're thinking and the actions we take. And then there's a very small slither that makes up the situations. So only 10% of our overall happiness is based on the situation, meaning what's happening. And we predict that it's the situation that makes up most of our happiness. It's not true. So the real lever and pulling is our thoughts and our actions, and the way in which we respond to things. So when you think about cultivation, okay, how does one cultivate it? What are the steps that maybe just for you, your own experience of how you've been able to cultivate more of that sense of happiness and that fulfillment within yourself versus relying on the accomplishments and the doing to provide it for you?
Mm. Well, what first comes to mind is, I don't mind sharing some of my story of self growth. I guess you can say what led me down to this path of being a coach myself. When I was 21, again, still undiagnosed, I'd also gone through a terrible breakup that I see myself as responsible for. I was living in New York City in the coolest part, St. Mark's, if anyone knows it. I had like this dream job right out of college, and I was miserable. I was like, could not be more miserable, and everything on paper was going very well for me. I wouldn't say it's a lever that leads to an automatic. Like we said, it requires cultivation.
Yeah.
And it took me about 10 years of cultivating. However, the lever that I pulled was to catalyze my growth at first was actually to ask for a psychiatrist. I recognized that there was depression going on, there was some impulsivity going on, and it was leading me down a very dark path. And it was just very black and white how I was feeling to what my life looked like. It's like
Mm.
something's not right. And so I remember I asked my mom if she would help me find a psychiatrist. And
Mm.
I actually think that is my proudest moment. I sought help. Um, and I wasn't necessarily at risk of self harm, but I studied psychology and I know how this goes. And I was like, I'm not willing to get to that level yet.
Yeah.
And then the very long story short is that from there, I enrolled in a lot of different types of therapy that really helped build my understanding of who I am and where all this comes from, not making myself wrong for I realized some chemical deficiencies that I had. And then I enrolled in coaching. And to, I guess, simply differentiate between the two, therapy is much more focused on the past and the healing of the past.
Mm-hmm.
And coaching is about understanding your present, again, like who you're being, and looking toward the future and who you want to be
Yeah.
and what you want to have happen for you and living in possibility. And so that was the next step for me. And boy, did that just blast open the doors of my understanding of what was possible in life. And like I said, I was born a very positive, possibility-esque person. And I still did not know what lied ahead for me.
Yeah.
So I would say, in short, that it was really just me recognizing that there was more and that I deserved more.
Mm.
And in order to impact people on this planet, which has always been a driving factor to me, I needed to take responsibility for being true to myself, even if it was extremely, excruciatingly uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's just a part of the process, right? I haven't had any buddy tell me that this process was comfortable.
It ain't for the faint. That's what I.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. If it's uncomfortable, it means you're doing something right. It means that you're pushing yourself in a way that's going to lead to growth. And I know I said it earlier, but it's just a common theme of connection. It- and I don't know if I've ever heard anybody explain it as well as you just did, the difference between therapy and coaching. I think you explained it really, really well. There's that approach of going into the past and healing some of the trauma, which is, I think therapy is a wonderful resource for that, and coaching
Oh, yeah.
about the present day. But if you consider what both of them are doing, they're establishing connection.
Yeah. Connection with self so that you can connect with others, so that you can connect with your purpose. I think I was trying to connect with others. Like I was trying to date again. I was trying to work on my job and my purpose. And I was like, I can't. I feel disconnected to them. I can't seem to really move forward in an authentic way because I was not connected to myself. And that's
Mm.
really what it was. If I'm going to be, completely honest, maybe you'll see as this goes. I have no problem being vulnerable because I'm super practiced at it through therapy and coaching. Um, that moment, like right before I asked my mom to help me find a psychiatrist, I remember being curled up in a ball, crying, and realizing, like, I remember saying it out loud in my head, oh my God, I don't like myself.
Mm. Wow.
And that was devastating to me. I didn't realize I didn't like myself. I was convincing myself I liked myself,
Hmm.
which is a little odd. And and I mean that's just translation for I'm completely disconnected to myself
Yeah.
because you don't
Yeah.
need to self love. I'm not going to go in a whole talk about self love, but it's not about you being awesome all the time or even being awesome most of the time. It's
Yeah.
about being your best friend and being connected to yourself and making who you are not just okay, but wonderful, whoever you are.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the saying of, you have to, people say you have to battle your demons, or you have to challenge your demons, you have to fight with your demons. No, you don't. That's not the approach to take. You're not going to win the battle, right? Put the fists up and like try to fight with yourself. You think you're going to win? I sometimes refer to it. It's like getting in the ring with Mike Tyson in his prime. You're not going to end. It's not going to end well for you. You're going to lose that battle. But if you were to approach those quote unquote demons like you would a best friend, the way you just said, with compassion, with kindness, it's not going to make everything better immediately. It's not going to all of a sudden you snap your fingers and you're going to be in this perfect state. But you've now loosened the grip it's had on you, and you can now have, I think it is a relationship to those quote unquote demons. Then you
Mm.
establish the connection to self. So if we talk about Stephen's story here a little, because I think that so much of this relates to him, and what he's going through and feeling so disconnected with his work. And there are three elements that you refer to in your TED talk that I wanted to bring up here. And it comes to relationship, respect, communication, and trust. You talk about that. Respect, communication, and trust. And of course, that applies in doctor-patient relationships, which I know you have a big background in, but I think it applies to any relationship, right? So in Steven's case, he has this vision of what he wants. He wants to move his company forward in a new direction, but he feels like he's being met with resistance. So how does he apply those things? How does someone apply those qualities of respect, communication, and trust within the workplace?
So, as we've been saying, if I didn't paint a clear enough picture, I believe it goes the hierarchy is connection to self, connection to others, connection to purpose, or at the very least, connection to self in order to get to others and purpose. And so, for anyone who comes to me, but particularly leaders who have already achieved so much, like at the very least on paper, this becomes really elusive because they're like, well, clearly I must know what I'm doing because I've gotten this far. And yet something feels off, right? Like, just like I said, at 21 in New York City, I was like, I seem to have gotten what I wanted, but something really doesn't feel right. And I don't really know how to move forward. So I see that similarly in Stephen's story. And in this, it's being met with resistance, sure, which is very frustrating. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd first ask ask for him to look into himself and see, like, well, might he be disconnected? And just for an example, I'm not sure if this would be the case for him, but perhaps there are times in the past where he had a specific vision, like had a big idea, and there was no hesitation. It didn't matter what other people said. He was like, no, we're doing this. This is what makes sense. This is the right thing to do. We're moving forward. But in this instance, he's being met with resistance, not just by his peers, but by himself.
I'd even say it seems to be more within himself than even his peers. Because in the story, and of course, I pull these stories from real life examples, Eva, people think that it's going to be met with resistance much more than they're actually having it in conversation. And it's our job, right, as coaches or consultants or just any kind of support, is to help them to realize the truth, which is it's more going on up here in your head than it is happening in real life.
Yeah. And this is where my company is called Bold Being for a reason. This is where it takes being bold and really like shaping what bold looks like for you is going to be so powerful. And again, I want to take a second to explain how boldness can be something that we are born with naturally. It's like just how we show up in the world. I myself am one of them. And that, by the way, it's not always a good thing if it's a power that has not been wielded.
Yeah, I'm going to be asking you about that too, because I'm very curious. Please continue.
Yeah. So a lot of my clients come to me who are already like naturally bold, but they don't know how to wield that power. But boldness is also something that can be cultivated. And I've worked on a lot of people with that as well, who desire to be bold. And they're like, but I can't make decisions and I don't know how to move past resistance. And, I always second guess myself. Boldness is really just, again, connecting with your authentic voice and vision for whatever you believe is truth and showing up through that. And often it means showing up in vulnerability. Vulnerability, in short, means you showing up fully as yourself, knowing that there is risk on the other side. Like it could be could be disconnection with yourself, but usually disconnection from others and opportunity. And this is why I'm glad that this is becoming more of a trendy thought. I hate that I said trendy, but like, I'm glad that it's coming to the surface as a truth that vulnerability is a strength because it's really synonymous with being bold, taking risks, like making things happen in your life when you have no idea how it's going to turn out.
Yeah.
And it could be a mess. It could be a mess. But honestly, I mean, think about it in your own life for anyone who's taken a risk. How often is it a mess afterwards?
Yeah.
and a mess that you can't clean up.
Yeah.
And then, even if it was a mess and difficult to clean up, do you regret doing it? Do you regret speaking your truth, being bold, doing what you thought was right, even if it didn't work out?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a study, and I'm going to forget the exact numbers. I know I will, but I'm going to do my best to reference this study about worries about what we think are going to happen. It was somewhere in the range of 92% of the time, the things that we worry are going to happen don't actually happen.
Oh,
And
yeah.
in the 8% of when they actually do happen, over 90% of the time, we actually feel like it was a good thing because we learned something of value. It taught us something. So in the end, it was below 2% of the time, the things that we worry about actually have a negative consequence.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, it's remarkable.
it's remarkable, right? It shows you that the predictions we have about things are so often wrong. The things we think are going to happen and how they're going to impact us are so often just complete illusions. So, okay, you said that yes, people are born bold. They can cultivate being more bold. And then there are people who have the natural strength, they're leveraging it. But how do they leverage it in a way where they don't get too egotistical and they don't become off as domineering? Because people who have that kind of approach, they're very visionary. They oftentimes, and I meet a lot of these people, they don't mean it. They don't mean to be domineering and to make people feel small or feel threatened, but they're having that kind of impact. And sometimes I've had to show them that and they don't like hearing it, but it's the truth and they need to hear it from someone, right? So, how do you help rein that back so that they are still received well as they are communicating their bold vision?
Great question, and absolutely necessary for anyone in a leadership role. I'd say anyone in life, but
Yeah.
definitely leaders. So this is where we move to phase two. I've never called it that. And that is connecting to connecting to others and purpose. So I add purpose in there, not just connecting to others, because purpose can look like the legacy you want to leave on this planet, but it could also look like what you're committed to in life. So, for instance, I'll just say with my husband, when we're having an argument, we're having a disagreement, and I'm feeling disconnected from him, I think about what am I committed to in life? What am I committed to in this relationship?
Yeah.
And no surprise, my life commitment is connection. But everybody's got something else. It could be love, it could be harmony, it could be, I guess those are different words for connection, but everyone has like a slight variation on what it is that truly drives them from their innermost core in everything in life.
Mm.
And mine is connection. So so for a leader, for instance, if they're not wanting to be egotistical and they know they're right about something, there's, of course, I don't know if this is obvious, it seems obvious to me, but the approach of empathy, like, let's figure out where they're coming from. But if empathy sometimes trips people up because some people will think it's like being in that person's shoes, and I can go and talk about empathy for quite a while as well. But at the very least, like, what's going to lead to us as a group or individuals being connected? What is it that's going to lead to us having aligned commitments? So perhaps uh, there are different ways to do this. This is where we get a little tactical. Like, how do you talk to people or a group about what they're committed to? But getting down to that and seeing where there is alignment in action. Like, how can we all be on the same page?
Yeah.
So with Stephen, for example, sure, the leadership team maybe hasn't changed things in like 2 decades, and he's like, I want to wipe the slate clean, and I have all these great ideas, and you guys are going to love them, but at the end of the day, they've never done that, so they're going to be uncomfortable. He's uncomfortable. So the approach would be, okay, well, what are we all committed to here? What is actually what we're aiming for? hopefully it's not just money. What is it that we can all get behind unanimously?
Yeah.
That is absolutely step number one. I don't think you can move forward before any of that happens.
Yeah. There's a reason why organizations who succeed talk about how having an aligned vision is what is getting them there. Why those organizations have low turnover and why they have employee retention and great employee satisfaction. Because the one angle I like to take here is we fall into resistance or disconnection when we're self-absorbed. If I'm thinking about myself, like you gave the example of with your husband, right, and my fiance too, if there's an argument, I'm caught in thoughts about me and I'm the victim and you're doing this to me, right? That's the disconnection, right? And so what Stephen has to do here, anybody in a leadership position, is learn to not let your own stuff, your own the victimization, what others are thinking about me, get in the way of your bold vision. And that is the way you do that is to be able to focus on something greater than yourself, something that you can align everyone towards, as you were saying, a purpose that isn't just about me. It isn't just about you. It's what we are all culminating towards.
Yes. And it's very rare that I feel people can't come together on something they're aligned on because all of us have the same basic human needs and desires in life, like belonging and safety, and you could say legacy or impact, love. And so, usually, if you get down to it, you can find something. If for some reason one party is not willing, or you're just having way too tough a time finding where that alignment is, I would say in that situation, which is rare, is the time to be like, okay, this isn't a good fit. But that really doesn't have to happen that often. And this goes for romantic relationships too. And I'm going to try and handle this carefully. But I do believe that there are a lot of opportunities for marriages that have broken up to become realigned, and where they have either, not saying they haven't made an effort to make the relationship work, but perhaps it wasn't from that space, like from that really, really deep space. Because I think a lot of relationships, again, both parties have to be willing. That I think is really the biggest aspect.
Right.
But if they're both willing, most people can find the common denominator that they can connect on.
Yeah.
And so that could be romantic relationships. It could be friendships. It could be partners. It could be colleague. I mean, you name it. We're all humans. I mean, that's really my messaging for my TED Talk and essentially everything that I do. Another reason that I called it bold being, because we're not just being bold, but we are beings.
Yeah.
We are all beings at the end of the day. And that, at the very, very, very least, is something we can all align on.
Absolutely. And anyone listening, by the way, you don't need to be a CEO for this to apply to you. Anyone can be a leader. Anyone can apply this. And also, it could be situational at times too. There may just be a moment where you have to be the leader in a group or in a relationship where you have to realize, hey, there is a disconnection here. And I have to be bold to be able to align us towards a shared vision, personal relationships. And I know that you have a lot of experience in doctor patient relationships and with visionary leaders such as Stephen. So I want to ask you I'm going to put you in this kind of situation here. And I want to see how you respond to this. I promise it's not too challenging, but it's still, I like to do this at the end of every episode. I think it's a fun kind of exercise. So I want you to imagine, all right, there was Stephen, right? He was spinning in his chair. He was overwhelmed, overthinking. And let's imagine he gets up, walks out of his office, goes to the elevator. He hits the L button. He's going to go for a walk. The elevator door is open, and there you are. You were on the floor above. You were doing some work with the healthcare leaders in the other floor. And Stephen walks in the elevator, and now you're next to him. And on the elevator ride down, he tells you his story. He tells you what he's going through. But, in an elevator, you don't have a lot of time. You just have a few seconds there to be able to give him one piece of advice share with him one insight, what would you say to him there?
First of all, great question prompt. So it sounds cliche, but I just think it's so powerful because people don't do this enough. And that is truly listen to what you're really, what your voice is telling you. You could say it, your gut, your intuition. What is back there that is gnawing away at you that isn't being said? Because I feel like until you address that, again, you can't really move forward. And now this would be a little bit forward in an elevator, but I usually ask people boldly to ask themselves what they're scared of. What's the fear there? And usually we have a fear of a threat of love, belonging, and or safety. That's where we feel threatened in life. And if someone has not practiced at it, it can take a lot for them to get down to that level. So like with Stephen, I'd be asking him like, my purpose is to what's holding him back from actually taking action or speaking to these his senior leaders. So like basically, what are you scared of?
Yeah.
I feel like that's an insensitive way to put it, but really that's it's so core. It's the first step to connecting to yourself.
Yeah.
It's acknowledging what's disconnecting you from yourself.
Yeah. That's powerful stuff. Well, I know that the way you would communicate it wouldn't be too harsh. You have
I'll have to think about it.
you have a natural energy about you where I'm sure Stephen would appreciate the question and he would get a lot from it. So Eva, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to connect with me and talk through this story about Stephen. And for anyone listening, I really recommend finding Eva on LinkedIn. She has a lot of content that she posts there, or go to the website. It's boldbeing.co, boldbeing.co. And you have a newsletter very similar to the things that we're doing here, where there's stories that you're sharing. And if you like that idea of learning from stories, then go to boldbeing.co, sign up for the newsletter, and you will get the stories along with some takeaways there from the kind of experiences that Eva's having with her clients. So Eva, I want to just say thank you again for being a guest. And I really appreciate all the insights you shared today.
Thank you, Jay. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and I greatly appreciate the work that you do and what you're putting out there for everyone to hear.
Talk about vulnerability. Talk about authenticity, being real. That's Eva Minkoff. And I'm going to do my best to synthesize our conversation down to our 3 insights and our 3 actionable takeaways. The first insight: you are a human being, not a human doing. Instead of only focusing on what it is that you're doing, ask yourself, who have I been? Who am I now? Who do I want to be on my journey? Let that be the focus rather than only on what is it that I need to do. Second insight: you can only connect with others when you're connected to self. She tells that story of how she was in New York City and she didn't like herself and she couldn't connect with others. Make sure there's alignment to self before you can even have that connection with other people. The third insight, it's related, but it's the next step after that. Being bold requires authenticity and vulnerability. When you're feeling disconnected, it's because you're not being your authentic self. You want to be bold, you have to show up as your authentic self with the risks involved. It's going to take some risk, but anything that you're worried about most likely is not going to happen. First, actionable takeaway: ask for help. I really appreciated her vulnerability in telling her story about how she said it was her proudest moment when she looked into therapy and got the help that she needed. And for you, if it's about healing the past, therapy is a great path. If it's about taking inventory of the present and building towards a new future, then coaching could be the right fit. But getting help is not a sign of weakness. No, it's a sign of courage. Second actionable takeaway, it's a question. What are we all committed to? When you want people to buy into your bold vision, make sure that you're all aligned towards a value, a purpose, a mission. And if you aren't able to get someone to connect those dots, then they may not be the right fit. But first, make that attempt to align towards a shared commitment. Third, actionable takeaway. It's another question. What are you scared of? What's the fear? If you have a bold vision of something you want to do, but you're holding yourself back, there's some resistance there, take inventory of that fear. You have to address it directly. Otherwise, it's going to continue to plague you in the future. Join us in our next episode on Friday. I'm going to go deeper into that study I mentioned. It's a 2019 study. It's titled The Realization of Worries by Penn State University. And I think it's just a fascinating discovery of the difference between actual worries and perceived worries. And I'm going to give you a specific technique. The acronym is ATW. And it's something that you can use as a means to work through perceived worries whenever they arise so that they don't limit you from taking bold action. Until next time, thank you for listening.